the recording. Record and flip. Record and flip. All right. So we're going to talk about special occasion speaking. I know the textbook goes into a little bit of detail as to what is included in special occasion speaking. I want to continue that and share with you some video examples of different special occasion speeches. We're going to talk a little bit about what makes special occasion speeches unique compared to the informative speech and the persuasive speech. And then the final video we're going to watch actually isn't the speech itself, but it's more of an analysis of what this person did well in the speech that was effective, because we can learn from their techniques, from their methods. And so you'll see when we get to that final video, specifically, you'll hear some strategies that this person used in their special occasion speech. So let's get started. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Gettysburg Address, 1863. My fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Inaugural Address, 1961. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a sweltering state with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream speech, 1963. So, Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address in 1863, John F. Kennedy's presidential inaugural address in 1961, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech at the Lincoln Memorial in 1963 are some of the most memorable words that we have throughout history. That is what they all have in common: memorable words, powerful words. And some of the most memorable words throughout history came from special occasion speeches just like these. Now, from introducing a colleague at work to delivering a toast at a friend's wedding or a eulogy at a family member's funeral, even maybe speaking at a commencement ceremony, there are many times in our lives when we may be called upon to deliver a special occasion speech. Those special occasion speeches may be before thousands, or they just may be in small groups, whether they're work groups or groups with school. Again, we just may be called upon to say some words at an occasion. All of this is what we consider special occasion speaking. And so I want to talk a little bit about what makes special occasion speeches unique. I'm going to talk through the types of special occasion speeches and show you some examples of those special occasion speeches. And then I'm going to provide you a template that I've designed to help you craft your own special occasion speeches. So let's get started. What makes special occasion speeches unique? Well, many special occasions involve just some sort of public speaking. Ceremonies such as weddings, funerals, dedications, all include speeches. And the speeches are the part of that event, the part of that occasion that makes it special, that makes it memorable. And so the primary purpose of a special occasion speech is to neither inform or persuade, but to fulfill the needs of the occasion, whatever that might be. There might be information that you provide, and there might be persuasive elements to your speech, but the aim, the focus, is to identify the needs of the occasion and design a speech that meets those needs. So you as the speaker have some responsibility up front to determine what are the needs of this occasion. So is the need to celebrate? Is it to entertain? Is it to inspire? Is it to give thanks or to remember someone? It's for you to determine the words that are needed for that occasion. So let's talk about the types of special occasion speeches. So if the purpose, the goal, the point of a special occasion speech is to fulfill the needs of the occasion, right, we can kind of divide these speeches into different types based on the groups that you may be speaking in front of, or based on the topics of your speech. And so the first is a speech of introduction. So the first type of speech, the speech of introduction, is when you introduce someone. You could also introduce something, like an idea, to an audience, but it's most commonly introducing someone to the audience. A good introduction builds enthusiasm for the upcoming speaker. It generates interest in the speaker, and if they have a specific topic, it generates interest in that topic. They should be brief, they should be accurate, they should be adapted to the occasion, adapted to the speaker, and create a sense of anticipation for the speaker. And this is the specific type of special occasion speech we're going to practice in this course. We won't practice any of the other ones, but the template that I provide you will help you write speech outlines for all of these types. But I want us to take a look at an example of a self-introduction speech. Now, we all did short self-introductions in this class. This is going to be just a little bit longer and a little more detail. And specifically why I like showing this example is because the speaker does a skillful job of finding a story and sharing a little bit about themselves through this story. And so it's through the narrative that we learn about who this person is and what they value. And so I would encourage you, if you ever have to do an introduction either of yourself or someone else, find that narrative, find that story, just like this speaker does. So let's listen to this example. The title of this is called The Courtyard.
When I look at this photo, I think of lemons, peaches, and guava. I think of lush green trees and bright red roses. I think of good food and joyous celebrations, birthdays, weddings, holidays. This courtyard is where my grandmother lived and taught me about my Mexican heritage. Even though I was born in the U.S. and have lived here all my life, the courtyard is very meaningful to me. It has helped me to understand the importance of family and the cultures that have shaped my life. The courtyard symbolizes the importance of family in my life. It's located in a small town in Mexico where both my parents were born and raised. I first visited the courtyard when I was 5 years old, and I will never forget the meals my grandmother's love. Over the years, she taught me to dance to mariachi music in the courtyard, about the roses and the other flowers, and she told me the story of when my father asked for my mother's hand in marriage in that very courtyard. In addition to family, the courtyard symbolizes the different cultures that have shaped my life. Whenever we went to Mexico, my parents lit up because it felt like home to them, but not to me. Sometimes I felt out of place, especially because I was born in the US and my Spanish is not perfect. That led me to wonder who I am and how I should identify. With friends here, I sometimes feel too Mexican, but in Mexico, I definitely feel American. I don't think I ever got over these feelings, but I've learned to accept them. So, even though now I'm a student here at Wisconsin, when I look at this photo, I can practically smell the roses and hear the joy of family celebrations. And I miss my grandmother. She died 2 years ago, but I can still see her face and hear her voice. And I remember all the things she taught me on the tiled floor by the fountain. Now, I proudly call the US home, but when I look at this photo, I will always think of my grandmother and my home away from home. Thank you.
So in this example, again, through this story, this narrative of the courtyard, we learn some things about her, that she values family, that she values wise family members like her grandmother. They value story, it sounds like, in her family. We also hear the immigrant story, right? Her heritage and cultural background. And so without stating specifically, my family's from Mexico, here's where I live, here's what I do, here's what I enjoy, right? She took a different angle. She did, through this story, shared those things. So she didn't have to say it point blank. She was able to get to it as she shared this story of the courtyard. So I would encourage you to find the ways to do that in all of your speeches moving forward. Find the story, find the narrative, and find a way to work your speech around that story and use that story as like a central theme, a central element in your speech. The next example of a speech that I want us to watch is a classmate introduction speech. And so this is going to be the next practice speech that we do. And so today, before we get done with class, you'll be paired up. You'll be with a partner. And you'll have some time to swap contact information, get to know them, and the plan will be for next week for you to introduce them. And so this example is a good model for you to follow as far as a classmate introduction speech. Before we watch this clip, I want to make sure that you recognize that the time that you spend with someone, talking with them and interviewing them, everything that they share with you may not be something they want included on the speech. And so we'll hear at the very beginning the story that this person shares may not be a story that everyone wants shared about them, but as long as she got permission from the person she interviewed or from her classmate to share this story, then it's okay. And so make sure as you are getting to know the person that you are interviewing and getting to know for this classmate introduction assignment, that you verify, hey, is it okay if I share that story with this group? So this is an example of a classmate introduction speech. The title of it is Fearless. So let's listen to this example.
Fear, monsters, the unknown. We all know what it's like to be scared. Our classmate Bella certainly does. Ever since she can remember, she's had night terrors. Dreams so vivid and so real that she'll wake herself up in a panic. Once, she even fell out of bed and rammed her chin into a dresser. That's Bella at night. But during the day, she's completely different. She's fearless. She's fearless in athletics, she's fearless in travel, and she's fearless in seizing new opportunities. Bella is fearless when it comes to athletics. In high school, she played on her varsity soccer team for 3 years. That's impressive considering her team won state championships her junior and senior year. On the soccer field, Bella is a midfielder, which means she uses a lot of endurance. Outside the soccer field, she uses her endurance to run marathons. Athletics give Bella bravery. Bravery that she uses in other parts of her life. Other parts, like travel. When she was 7, she traveled to Italy for a family reunion and loved every second of it. Last year, she went to New York and the Dominican Republic, where she participated in Alternative Spring Break. This year, she's going on Alternative Spring Break again, this time in New Orleans. Wherever she travels, Bella looks to expand her horizons. She also looks to expand her horizons by seizing whatever opportunities, large or small, come her way. For example, Bella grew up in Minnesota and often went to the state fair where she tried unusual foods, like deep fried butter. In her junior year of high school, she tried being a vegetarian, but that failed miserably. Here, at Wisconsin, she wants to be a business major, even though she has no idea exactly what she wants to do with her life. Soon, she plans on joining a sorority and starting a flag football team. Whatever it may be, Bella will be open-minded and seize what life has to offer. An amazing athlete, a seasoned traveler, an open-minded and adventurous person. That's Bella. She's fearless. Except when it comes to the occasional night terror.
So in this example, you hear the reference to being fearless, right? And the speaker comes back to this in the end. That's a great example of where you start with a story, you carry that theme throughout your speech, and then you conclude that story in your conclusion. And when we get to talking about the speech outline template in a little bit, you'll start to see some of the pieces that you just heard verbally, right? You'll hear the attention step, you'll hear the rapport step, you'll hear each of the main points, and you'll hear that conclusion where she reviews her main points and has a memorable closing. In this case, her memorable closing was coming back to that story that she shared in her attention step. So as we dive into that template in just a little bit, you'll start to recognize some of these things from the examples that we watch. So the next type of speech is a speech of presentation. So this speech is given when someone receives a gift or an award. These should be brief, and the main purpose is to explain why the recipient is receiving the gift or the award in the first place. It should discuss the the recipient's achievements in a way that's meaningful to the audience. And so I have an example of a speech of presentation. I'll post this link on Brightspace. I won't play the video here currently. It's about a 4-minute video. But if you ever are tasked with the challenge of giving a speech of presentation or presenting an award to someone, this is a good example to follow. I do want to spend just a moment explaining where this video comes from. So this video comes from an organization called Toastmasters International. Has anyone heard of that organization before? Toastmasters International? So it's an international organization that's committed to leadership development and public speaking skill development. You know, there's few clubs in the world for adults to join and be a part of, but this is one of those that's purely focused on your professional development. And so this person here is a working professional who has signed up to be a part of Toastmasters International in order to achieve a public speaking certificate. There's 2 tracks, the public speaking track and the leadership track. The public speaking track, you get a workbook and you go through a series of speeches just like we do in this class. In fact, a lot of speech classes are modeled similarly. Actually, it's reversed. Toastmasters is modeled after a lot of the way speech classes are modeled because there's a lot of overlap. A lot of those of us who teach public speaking have been involved with Toastmasters from the beginning. And so you'll see a lot of familiar things. But you go through and you deliver a series of speeches, a speech of introduction, a speech of presentation, a speech of acceptance, a ceremonial or commemorative speech. And you do that and you get feedback on that from the leaders in the organization so that you can grow and develop in that skill. And you do a series, once you do a series of achievements, you then get a certificate in that. With the leadership track, you serve in various leadership positions and develop that skill. So again, it's an organization purely focused on your professional development and developing these skills. And this video specifically is someone in the process of doing that. So, and she does a good job kind of going through and explaining, how the person came to receive this award and what their, and what the purpose of the award is. And so, again, I won't play it in class, but I'll post this link on Brightspace in case you would like to watch it, watch a good example of it. Well, that's a good thing because it's not currently available. Okay. So the next type of speech is going to be a speech of acceptance. So this speech gives thanks for a gift or an award that you are receiving. It should show thanks for those giving the gift and acknowledge those who helped the recipient win the award or receive the gift. And if it was won in a competition, you should acknowledge or praise the other competitors. Now, just a side note, because the examples I show here, you may be like, well, when am I going to be, giving a speech of presentation? When am I going to be giving a speech of acceptance? In our everyday lives, there are opportunities, right, where we may receive some kind of gift, right? And then you want to express thanks for that gift. Well, what we learn in writing speeches can apply to our everyday communication. They can apply to our everyday interactions. One of the most common, at least in the workplace, awards that is won is Employee of the Month. So if you work in an organization that has an Employee of the Month award, you win that, right? Sometimes it's expected that you share just some words of thank you for receiving that gift. Or your supervisor might tap you and say, hey, can you share a few words? I know you took a speech class, right? Can you share a few words giving this award, this Employee of the Month award to this person? So that is just one of those common ways in which you may come back and say, oh, I need to just write a short speech of acceptance or a short speech of presentation. So the acceptance speech example that I have is one from Malala Yousafzai, who is a winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, the youngest winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. And again, I'll post this on, well, it actually may work, but I'll post it on Brightspace as well to give you an example of a skillful way to say thank you in regards to the speaking situation. She does a great job of working in humor and referencing other people who have won the Nobel Peace Prize, but then also getting to the point of at least her mission in advocating for education, specifically women in education around the world. And so she was shot in the face by the Taliban just for going to school, just for getting an education. And so that kind of led her to be in the spotlight for specifically education and girls getting an education in certain countries that have forbidden it. So the next speech, and this is the one where I want us to watch a couple videos. So the next speech is a commemorative speech, or also known as a ceremonial speech. The textbook may also call this a didactic speech. This speech pays tribute to a person, to a group of people. It can also pay tribute to an institution or to an idea. But the purpose is to commemorate, right? The purpose of this speech is to inspire the audience and to heighten their admiration for the person, for the institution, or for the idea that is being praised. And so while it does present information, which can sometimes confuse people because they're like, oh, why is it not an informative speech? Again, an informative speech, the goal is just to inform. If your goal is beyond informing and persuading and is to entertain or to admire or commemorate, that falls into this category. And so a commemorative speech expresses feelings or it arouses sentiments, where an informative speech just communicates information clearly and accurately without necessarily provoking pathos or emotions. Commemorative speeches, we want to do that. We want to invoke pathos and emotions. And some of the most memorable speeches throughout history are commemorative addresses. And we continue to find them meaningful to this day because of their eloquent expressions and the phrases that they give us that inspire us. Because they use stylistic devices, such as those that we're going to cover in this class, to get their message across and do so effectively. So they enhance their speech with imagery, with rhythm, with creativity of their speech, with repetition and antithesis. All things, they find the story, the narrative, and share it with us and reference that and connect that to morals and values. So again, toasts like at weddings or at a company dinner, tribute speeches like a eulogy or keynote speeches at a conference or convention are all examples of commemorative speeches. So let's watch an example of a commemorative speech. This first one is commemorating a person. And so let's listen and see, as we listen, see if you can identify any specific words that stand out to you that invoke emotion, that make you feel an emotion. See if you can identify what that emotion is, right? Do they use a phrase that makes you feel angry, that makes you feel happy, that makes you feel admiration for the person that they're talking about? And see if anything that they share stands out to you. So let's listen to this example. Well, that example is not working, so we will move on to the next example. All right. It was an example of a student introducing Elie Wiesel, who was a Nobel Peace Prize winner, did a lot of advocacy work in the realm of diversity, inclusion, human rights, and human rights abuses. As a survivor of the Holocaust, he had a firsthand experience into one of the most horrific times of our world. And so this student specifically is talking about the good things that Elie Wiesel has done through his work and his advocacy work. So the last type of commemorative speech that I want to watch is the keynote speech. And this video is more than just the speech itself. It provides an insightful look at the speech that really changed the country in 2004. You may or may not have seen this speech live or seen recordings of this speech, but I want you to, as we watch this, specifically see if you can identify, because they're going to talk about the things that are done well in this speech, the things that President Obama did well in delivering this speech. So again, this video is more than just the speech itself, but they dive into some of the strategies that make his speech effective. So when you hear those, write those down, because the strategies that he uses in this speech, we utilize in our speeches in this class. So let's listen to this example of what they call the speech that made Obama president, because in 2004, outside of Illinois, hardly anybody knew who he was. And he delivered a speech at the end of the Democratic National Convention. Some people say it was the best speech of the convention, even better than the people we were looking to nominate for president and vice president, John Kerry and John Edwards. And so it really put him on the map as someone who could eventually run for president. And you'll see that explained in this video. So let's watch.
Barack Obama in 2004 was totally unknown. People were saying, I don't know who this guy is. I wonder why they picked him.
He had his reputation as a bit of an upstart, as sort of a young, rising figure in the party, but no one knew who this guy was. This was his chance to introduce himself to people.
Tonight is a particular honor for me because, let's face it, my presence on this stage is pretty unlikely. My father was a foreign student, born and raised in a small village in Kenya.
What makes a great political speech is if you can somehow fold your story into the larger American story.
The next thing he says is about his mother's family. His grandfather fought in World War II. He used the GI Bill. They settled him in Kansas, so white people could say, he's just like us.
My parents shared not only an improbable love, they shared an abiding faith in the possibilities of this nation. I stand here knowing that my story is part of the larger American story, that I owe a debt to all of those who came before me, and that in no other country on earth is my story even possible.
Going into this speech, we've had 4 years of George Bush, and we felt as a country like we've grown further apart.
2004 was very much a divisive partisan race. Obama's speech is in some ways an antidote to that.
Alongside our famous individualism, there's another ingredient in the American side, a belief that we're all connected as one people. If there's a child on the south side of Chicago who can't read, that matters to me even if it's not my child. If there's a senior citizen somewhere who can't pay for their prescription drugs and having to choose between medicine and the rent, that makes my life poorer even if it's not my grandparent. It is that fundamental belief, I am my brother's keeper, I am my sister's keeper, that makes this country work. E pluribus unum, out of many, one.
He gives a speech that presages his entire political message of 2008, which is this sort of post-partisan argument.
Now, even as we speak, there are those who are preparing to divide us. The spin masters, the negative ad peddlers, who embrace the politics of anything goes. Well, I say to them tonight, there is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
Obama was born with two great gifts. One is his mind, and the other is his ability to speak to large groups of people.
There are three things that Obama does that really makes that speech effective. He wants concrete detail. He likes story, and he loves antithesis. the use of repetition in structure to show contrast. There is not a liberal America or a conservative America. There is one America.
There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America. But pundits like to slice and dice our country into red states and blue states. But I've got news for them too. We worship an awesome God in the blue states, and we don't like federal agents poking around in our libraries in the red states. We coach Little League in the blue states, and yes, we've got some gay friends in the red states. We are one people, all of us pledging allegiance to the Stars and Stripes, all of us defending the United States of America.
The way he uses his hands, he actually points a lot, does a lot of this, a lot of this, a lot of that.
In doing so, he gives off this sense of energy. I am new, I'm someone who is dynamic.
And he doesn't do that so much anymore. He's a little more solemn and reserved when he gives speeches today. And I think it's more reflective of his office.
In the end, that's what this election is about. Do we participate in a politics of cynicism, or do we participate in a politics of hope? It's the hope of slaves sitting around a fire singing freedom songs. The hope of immigrants setting out for distant shores. The hope of a young naval lieutenant bravely patrolling the Mekong Delta. The hope of a mill worker's son who dares to defy the odds. The hope of a skinny kid with a funny name who believes that America has a place for him too. Hope in the face of difficulty. Hope in the face of uncertainty. The audacity of hope.
His appearance at that convention, which was the best speech of the convention, better than John Kerry's, was electrifying. And without it, he wouldn't be president.
I think sincerity means a lot. There are people who, when they speak the truth as they see it, and they're very effective doing that.
I believe this country will reclaim its promise, and out of this long political darkness, a brighter day will come. Thank you very much, everybody. God bless you.
When he delivered this speech in 2004, I'm gonna give away my age. I wasn't old enough yet to vote, but I was watching the speech because I had friends who had turned 18, so they could vote, and so they were very invested in that election. And so I remember watching it, and again, in Alabama, we had no idea who this guy was, right? But we were a little frustrated, in watching both conventions that year, both the Republican and the Democratic conventions. But this speech stood out among both of those, and we're like, whoa, who is this guy? We need to listen to what he has to say. And at that point, no one thought an African-American man could be president. No one. They're like, it's just people vote, he's not going to get the votes, right? And so I think it speaks a lot to his ability, like they said here, to speak to the audience and speak in ways that moved them, right? Moved us to feel positive emotions that really led to him being able to combat that and actually get elected to be president. They mentioned some techniques that he used here, so just holler out, what were some of the techniques that they talked about?
A story that's similar with the people you're speaking to.
Right, you mentioned the story, yeah. So the story and we, throughout our speeches, are building rapport, and we'll talk about in just a minute, finding common ground and using stories that our audience can relate to. Yeah?
It was that word for repetition, the same kind of continuous idea.
Yep, antithesis, or repetition. Yes, very powerful verbal technique, strategy, method that really does lend and make your speech powerful. So especially when we get to persuasive speeches, you'll want to incorporate. We'll dive more into language and the use of language like these examples here, because you'll want to do that. What else stood out?
He will use a lot of his hands to...
That's right. Gestures. Specifically, yes, how he moved his hands. He did a lot of pointing, not pointing at the audience, but kind of pointing up in the air, using his hand, doing this, doing that, right? Those gestures, psychologically, demonstrate for the audience confidence. And it's that confidence and using gestures that show confidence that aid your verbal delivery. Great. Anything else stand out? Related to story, they mentioned one called concrete detail. So using specific examples, right? And we're going to learn how to do this when we talk about finding supporting material, supporting points for our main points. We want to use examples. We want to use examples. We want to use quotes. We want to, I misspelled that, quotes. We want to use stats. He doesn't use any statistics in his speech specifically, but all of those are concrete detail that we should use. Cool. So that, anything else stand out to you? Are there any other insights you got from that? I think that was all I had in my notes. He portrayed a lot of confidence, and again, people in other parts of the country who didn't know him as a senator, he was then put on the map as someone who, 4 years down the road did run and did win. So he also mentioned, this was the last thing I want to know about, was hope, appeals to hope. When we use words like appeals to hope specifically, that is pathos, right? That's emotion. That's when we are talking about having hope, right? Just talking about it, that psychologically conveys to our audience hope. It makes our audience feel hopeful when he shares all those stories, right? Of people being hopeful, singing slave songs around the campfire, right? He shares these examples of hope, and in so doing, pathos, through the pathos, the persuasion of emotional appeal, we feel that hope alongside him. And he even wrote a book called The Audacity of Hope, so which I recommend reading if you haven't checked it out. So, those are techniques, those are the types of special occasion speeches. So now that you know the types of special occasion speeches and have seen some examples, I'd like to share with you a template for a special occasion speech outline that you can use to craft your own special occasion speech. In fact, you'll want to use it to craft your classmate introduction speech. So let's take a look at this outline. And first, let me say that while we're specifically talking about special occasion speeches right now, this template is going to look very similar when we get to informative speeches and persuasive speeches, because the template is essentially the same with just some minor changes. So we're going to talk about the types, right? We talked about the types of special occasion speeches. We have different types of informative speeches, so that will change. We have different types of persuasive speeches, so that will change. But the subject, right, parts of this, when we get to the body and the conclusion, a lot of these are going to be the same. So we're kind of establishing a foundation now with using this outline that you're going to repeat and use multiple times to build that skill. So let's start with the subject. So with the subject, this is going to be general. This is going to be a general word or phrase. So bicycles is a common subject, right? For a speech of introduction, it would be whoever it is you're introducing is your general subject. When we get to informative speeches, like I said, bicycles, cars, what was what I heard a few years ago, the plastic bag tax, the soda tax was one that came up a couple of years ago. And so those are just general subjects, right? So you'll select you'll write in whatever your general subject is. For our special occasion speeches, the general purpose is to fulfill the needs of the occasion. That stays the same. And again, you decide what the need of the occasion is, and you'll write that into the specific purpose. So is the need to entertain? Is the need to inspire? Is the need to introduce, right? What is the need of that speech? You identify what that is. And for a speech of introduction, the need is just to introduce. It's pretty simple. But again, if this was a speech of acceptance, it would be the need is to accept an award, or if this is a speech and presentation, it's to present an award, to show thanks or give thanks. So you decide what the specific purpose is. Then you select what the type is. And specifically in this class, we're doing the speeches of introduction. So when you pull this up as a Word document from Brightspace, you can delete 2, 3, and 4. And you can move this up to that line to kind of condense the outline if you want, because we're just focused on the introduction. You can disregard that part. Present the speaker or idea to the audience. That'll be the goal of our speeches, special occasion speeches. So then we get to our organizational pattern. And remember, we learned from Corax of Syracuse, a speech must have an introduction, body, and a conclusion. We learned from Cicero that arrangement is important. How we arrange our speech is important. And so when we get to the organizational pattern, that is precisely it. That is arrangement. And so we arrange the main points of our speech in various ways. When we, for this speech, we're going to learn just about these 3. When we get to informative speaking, we'll add some more organizational patterns, and then we'll add some others when we get to persuasive speaking. So by the end of the course, you'll have a variety of organizational patterns you'll be familiar with that you can use in any speech. But to start, we're just going to use these main 3 of topical, chronological, and comparative. So let me just talk about those briefly. So topical. So topical is the broadest, the most general organizational pattern. It can be really anything underneath that subject heading. So if this is a speech of introduction about me, it could be 3 facts about T.J. Martin, right? It could be 3 reasons T.J. Martin became an educator, right? 3 things T.J. Martin likes to do in his spare time, right? So it can be any information, any general information underneath this subject. And so they're just 2 or 3 topics. Chronological is anything to do in order of time. And again, these are specifically related to your main points. So these could be, your main points could be in order of date. So maybe it's, I'm going to introduce you to T.J. Martin and where he lived in the 2000s, where he lived in 2010, and where he lives now in 2020. And so you could do it in order of time. You could say, I want to introduce you to this person based on how they spend their day, morning, afternoon, evening. So anything to do with time. Other examples that you might use for an informative speech or persuasive speech might be in order of seasons. It could be in order of decade, right, or a century. Here's information about how we communicate in the 1800s, 1900s, and 2000s, right? So anything in order of time. If your main points are in order of time, it's chronological. And then the last one is comparative, and that's just where you're comparing 1 or more points. And you could do that for a person, right? I want to introduce you to T.J. Martin as an educator versus T.J. Martin as an athlete, right? You're comparing 2 things as you are introducing me to the group. So again, 1 or more points that you are comparing. But again, the easiest, the simplest is the topical organizational pattern. So for this classmate introduction, you'll want to select an organizational pattern, and then you'll write your title. The title is just a creative way to essentially share all of this with us. So in your title, we should be able to identify your organizational pattern, right? 3 facts, I know that's topical. 3 years would be chronological. 2, comparing 2 or more things, right? If you have that included in the title, we can get an idea of what your organizational pattern is. We also know whether it's an introduction, presentation, acceptance, or commemorative speech based on your title. So again, your title is a creative way to share with us some of this information. Now this is just the preparation stage, the preparation phase. And for every speech moving forward, we're going to have a preparation stage. So some thought has to be put into this in advance. And this goes back to one of Cicero's 5 canons, invention, right? Paying attention to how we create and invent our speech. And it helps us to do this before we dive into the writing process. So once we've made some decisions here as to the type, as to what our specific purpose is, and as to our organizational pattern, then we can move to the introduction. So The introduction of a speech includes 4 steps. So let's talk about these. And again, as we watch more examples of speeches in the class, you'll start to pick up on good examples of these. So the first step of an introduction is the attention step. This is a quote, a story, maybe a joke. This is a statistic, anything that gets the audience attention. And when you're delivering your speech, that is actually where you start. You start with your attention step. A lot of people may stand up and say, hello, my name is, this is my title. Nope, that's not where we start a formal speech. We start with the attention step, the quote, the story, the joke, the statistic, to get our audience's attention. A good way to visualize this is if you're in a room with 100 kindergartners, right? And they're all making noise, they're all having fun, and you got to get their attention. You're not going to stand up and say, hello, my name is. You're going to stand up and you're going to do something emotional, something exciting, something to get their attention, right? And we want to do the same thing, just start our speech with the attention step. Once you share that quote, that story, that statistic, then the next step is the rapport step. So just like we saw in the example with President Obama finding common ground with his audience, we do that through the rapport step. And the way we do that is we reference some common experience. So in some examples, like for the self-introduction, in the script, if you used the script, you didn't have to use the script, but if you used the script, you would have said, I'm sure we've all had to introduce ourselves, or we've all had to introduce ourselves in class, right? Referencing something we all have in common. So for a classmate introduction, you'll want to find something that we all have in common that you can reference for the rapport step. This is important because psychologically, for our audience, if we can reference some experience that we've all shared, then psychologically the audience is like, oh, okay, I can relate to that. I've shared that experience, right? I understand that. And that builds that rapport, and your audience is more likely to listen to you moving forward. So that is the point of the rapport step, to reference a common experience that most people have most likely had. When we get to informative speeches, right, you'll want to craft your rapport steps in a way that's related to your topic, right? Today I'm going to share with you, or before you get to sharing about bicycles, you would say, I'm sure we've all ridden a bicycle or we've seen people ride bicycles, right? Now today I want to share with you the 3 parts of a bicycle, right? That's a common informative speech. But again, that's an example of a rapport step, referencing some kind of common experience we most likely have all had. Then the next step is the credibility step. And it's important to know that psychologically your audience is asking why they should listen to you. And so you have to respond to that here at the beginning. So what are your credentials? Why are you credible? Why should we listen to you? Why should your audience listen to you? And so you have to respond to this. So for your classmate introductions, it could be as simple as saying, I've interviewed this person, I've gotten to know this person, now I'd like to introduce you to this person, right? Just saying you've done research or you've interviewed someone is sufficient, right? Because that at least gives us a little confidence that you know what you're talking about. When you do your informative speeches, right, you'll want to say, I've done research on this topic, I'm passionate about this topic, right? I have experience with this topic, and so that's why I want to share it with you today. So why should we listen to you? Why are you credible? So again, classmate introduction can just be, I've interviewed this person, I've gotten to know them, and then now I'd like to introduce them to you. And then the last step of the introduction is the preview step. So this previews your main points, and this serves a few purposes. So the textbook mentions, I want to highlight this importance of the primacy effect and the recency effect. So the primacy effect is that most people hear, or some people hear, or some people remember what they hear first in a conversation. The recency effect is some people remember what they hear most recently or last in a conversation. So if we frame our speeches as a conversation with our audience, and we know some people are going to remember what they hear first, and some people are going to remember what we say last, then we can appeal to that. We can incorporate and design a speech that helps them remember that. And so we also call this redundancy. And so the preview step is the first part of our redundancy. And redundancy with like technological systems, redundancies are built in so that if one part of the system fails, the whole thing doesn't fail. And that's essentially the point of redundancy in a speech. Is the preview step, we preview our main points. Today I'm going to share with you main point 1, main point 2, main point 3. Then in the body of the speech, we go into each of those main points, and then you'll see in the conclusion we have what's called the review step, where we review our main points. It's a mirror image of this preview step. We say, today I shared with you main point 1, main point 2, main point 3. So we put it in past tense. And that again appeals to this redundancy, so that if our audience didn't hear our preview step, if they completely zoned out in the body of our speech, maybe they caught our review step and at least know our 3 main points. And so that's the point of this redundancy, is you're repeating the same exact thing essentially 3 times. In the preview step, you're mentioning it in your body of your speech, and then in your review step. And so that's how you finish the introduction, and then from there, you proceed into the body of your speech. So the body of your speech is comprised of main points, subpoints, and transition statements. So let me just highlight these just briefly. So main points are going to be a key word or a phrase. They're not a full sentence, just a key word or a phrase. And remember, when you did the preparation for this speech, you selected an organizational pattern. So it's important to make sure that your main points represent that organizational pattern. So if you chose topical, these are going to be topics. Again, keywords or phrases. If this was chronological, these are going to be in order of time, right? 1800s, 1900s, 2000s, right? Morning, afternoon, evening. So your main points are going to reflect that organizational pattern. And then the bulk of the information that you research, that you include, your quotes, the information from your interviews, are all going to be in the subpoints or supporting points of your speech. So that's where you put the paragraphs, that's where you'll cite sources and include things in quotation marks and so on. So those are the subpoints and supporting points. And then you've got to get from one main point to the next main point. And that's where we have our transition statements. Now the textbook will call them connectives and say there's a variety of different types of connectives. I changed the word because this is how I learned it. I learned them as transition statements. And so there are a variety of ways to write transition statements. My preferred way is to summarize what you've just shared and preview what you're about to share. And you do that a variety of ways. You can say, similar to your preview step, right? You can say, now that I shared with you this main point, next, let me share with you my second main point, right? So now and next are good ways to phrase your transition statements. You can say, first I shared with you my first main point. Now let me share with you my second main point. So first, now, next, last are all ways to phrase your transition statements. And again, you're kind of summarizing, right? Now that I've shared with you about where TJ lived in the 2000s, let me share where he lived in 2010. And then you would say, okay, now that I've shared with you where he lived in 2010, lastly, let me share with you where he lived in 2020. So you guide your audience through your speech by providing these transition statements. The transition statements help your speech flow. And so it's very easy to tell if you don't have clearly thought out or articulated transition statements because your speech is choppy. In fact, that's usually the comment I would provide, is if I'm not hearing good, clear transition statements to take us through main point to main point, my feedback would be it was a little choppy, need to improve those transition statements. And that's how we get to main points. When we get to our last main point, we don't have a transition statement to go from the last main point to the conclusion. Instead, we have what's called a cue, C-U-E. Just like in theater, you have a cue, action. In speech, to cue our audience that we are getting to our conclusion, we say, in conclusion. And that cue, again, psychologically, our audience now knows, hey, they've gotten through the body of their speech, and if they've not been paying attention, they should pay attention, right? And so for those that are just coming back to your presentation at that point in time, then you proceed into the review step. And again, that's just a mirror image of your preview step. So preview step was today I will share with you main point 1, main point 2, main point 3. Review is today I shared with you main point 1, main point 2, main point 3. So that again, you build in that redundancy. And then you get to your memorable closing. And now the memorable closing is mirror image of your attention step. It serves the same purpose. In fact, I was taught that we want to start our speech with something amazing, something wow, where our audience is like, wow, that's amazing. A quote, right? A story, humor. We want to do the same thing in our memorable closing. We want to end with wow. So we start with wow and we end with wow. And so we use the same strategies, a quote, a story, humor. And in the example we heard of Fearless, we heard her complete a story. She started this story about this person being fearless as a part of her attention step. She references being fearless throughout the body of the speech to keep that theme rolling. And then at the end, she comes back to and references being fearless again. And so this story is what she's using as both her attention step and her memorable closing. And that's a very skillful way to do it. And as we dive into finding sources, finding stories, finding supporting points, citing our sources, and using language, we're going to develop these things further. But for right now, it can just be simply a quote, a joke, a statistic, or a story. And then, specifically for the special occasion speeches, we have some polite endings that we want to make sure that we include. So if it's a speech of introduction, you're introducing someone, you would conclude by saying, at least proper etiquette is to say, please give a warm welcome to, and whoever the person is. And then, everyone claps or everyone shakes their hand like you're introducing them at work. And so that's what we do for the polite ending there. Speech of presentation, please join me in congratulating this person. If it's a speech of acceptance, you just conclude by saying thank you. And if it's a commemorative speech, you usually conclude with your memorable closing and then say thank you. So that is what we do there. For the future speeches, like informative speeches and persuasive speeches, after your memorable closing, you usually just say thank you and sit down. So, that is, so you won't see the polite ending as a part of those speeches because that's just the way we end a speech. We always conclude our speeches by saying thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you. So that is the speech outline. We also have references, and what we'll start learning about next week is citing our sources. And when we start citing sources in our speech, we also want to make sure we include a references section. So I'll talk a little bit more about that next week. So we have talked about special occasion speaking, the different types of special occasion speeches, and the template that you should use to design your classmate introduction speech. So what I'd like to do now is I have note cards, and on this note card, if you would, write your name, your email address, and you can also, if you're comfortable sharing a phone number, you can put that on there as well. We call these contact cards, because this is how classmates can contact you. And usually what I do is I just mix them up and or rotate them. So you just kind of at random get selected a person. We have two people who are not here, and so I'll actually just have them introduce each other. So I will follow up with them individually. When we have an odd number of people in the class, we usually just do a group of triplets. Person 1 introduces person 2, person 2 introduces person 3. So since we have 3 people here, that's what we'll do. That's what we'll do here for that. So let me pull up the classmate introduction speech assignment so that you know what's expected. Just a minute to The internet here has been running very slow. So let's see if it connects me quickly. Yes, all right, improved. So we are going into week 3. So that is the classmate introduction. There we go. Zoom in a little bit. So for the classmate introduction, what we'll want you to do is interview a classmate using these prompts. Now, you can, again, ask more questions. You should ask more questions than just these 2 prompts, but specifically connecting to civic responsibility, specifically talking about what our missions are, right? We want to continue in that line of thought and ask each other, what's a societal or community problem that you're passionate about fixing or seeing resolved, right? So are these political concerns, community problems, maybe getting involved with a community organization or nonprofit causes, right? So what's something that you would like to see fixed? That could be local, it could be national, it could be international. And then in what ways are you interested in helping solve that problem? And so again, that could be by campaigning on behalf of a politician that's doing good work. It could be working with an organization or volunteering with an organization in support of a specific cause, or just educating friends and family about this concern. And so when you interview each other, make sure that you just ask these 2 questions, get that information. You'll want to work that into the body of your speech. But again, ask additional questions, right? Not, where they're from, what they enjoy doing, why are these things of particular interest to them? And so after you spend some time interviewing them, then you'll have what you'll need just to write a short speech of introduction using this template. And it's a very short speech, maximum 2 minutes. Maximum 2 minutes. It should be delivered extemporaneously as best as you can from brief notes. And then again, just like the other practice speeches, save whatever you speak from, upload it. Either you can type it up and upload it to Brightspace, you can take a picture of it, upload it, but just submit some documentation to Brightspace before the following week, and I will assign you all of those points. So this isn't due until February, when was it? February 8th, I think it was. So let's go back to, so we'll have some time on Tuesday to work on this as well. But the reason I want you all, I try to go back and it's going to take no, here it is. It's going to usually take a while. Yeah, February 8th. So, so for us, that is going to be not next week, but the week after. So next week we'll meet the 1st and the 3rd. And so I'll set some time aside in class for you to spend some time talking with each other. Since not everyone has pure doubles, essentially, you'll need to spend some time bouncing around, talking with each other. And so these, again, these classmate introductions, just like we've done with the previous ones, you just stand up where you're at and introduce them. So not a lot of detail, but you're at least practicing using the outline, which is one of the goals, right? Get you familiar with this outline. We're going to change it just a little bit because after we do this, we're going to start using the informative speech outline for the next 2 practice speeches. But at least this gets you familiar with a simple, basic speech outline. Any questions about that? Questions? So, contact card. Trade. There you go. There you go. You can also, since you'll have contact information, you can also send a message and say, hey, can you type up a response to this, to these 2 prompts if you want to. So however you want to collect the information, either inside or outside of class, you're welcome to do that. Like I said, I will provide some time in class for you to touch base verbally. We have our other 2 people that I've got to work with, so they may or may not be able to do it physically in class. So I'll work with them to see. So that's all I have for tonight. So if you want to touch base with each other now, feel free to. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes remaining. If there's any questions you have for me or anything I can do to help you, definitely let me know. Yeah, Mike?
Yes, the quizzes. I was trying to figure out how to view the results.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. Is there a way is that possible?
Yes, you should be able to see them. And let's see, I can pull them up and show you. You should be able to see them after you complete the first one.
Yep, and then yep.
But so you didn't see like a place to view them?
Yeah, no. For it was the second one. It was the chapter 16 or something. I think it was.
Chapter.
For week 1.
Oh, for week 1. Okay. Chapter 16.
Yep.
Okay. I can just go in and double check the settings here, just to make sure. So 2 attempts, highest allowed. Go to quiz setup. And go to restrictions and assessment, 2 attempts, highest attempt, automatically, no, that's not it. Auto-publish results immediately upon completion. When this setting is enabled, learners will be able to view their evaluated attempt immediately upon submission. Submission views. Settings control what is displayed to learners. Note, questions that cannot be evaluated by the system will be scored as 0 until manually evaluated. I don't have any manuals. So that is saying right there, it's under submission views.
Gotcha.
So let me see if I go into view a student. I'm not taking it, so it actually probably won't let me see anything. But let's just see what we can see. Come on. Okay, yeah, it's not gonna let me.
Alright. I can do it again for the next one once the next quiz is due.
Yeah.
And I'll just kind of go through a little slower because I was kind of moving around kind of quick.
And if you don't see it, take a screenshot of what you see and send that to me because that'll help me troubleshoot it.
Okay.
I can always go in and give you additional attempts if you so.
No, I was good with the I was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, that one took me a little longer. There was a few questions that were stumping me up.
Sure. Yeah.
And then there's a lot of the times the ones with the same answer options. So
Right.
it's like, dang, which
Yep.
one? So those two. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, if any time you're like, I didn't get to see the results before I took it again, let me know and I'm happy to add another attempt for you. But you should be able to see submission views. I wish they gave me like a dummy account so that I could actually go in and be like a student, but they just have this view as student option, which doesn't do like Canvas does. So, but yeah, let me know. So I had a student over at Concordia yesterday. She said, "Man, the quiz is taking me a long time. Is there any way, any recommendations you have to speed up the process?" And I said, "Well, if you get 2 attempts, and again, my goal is you don't have to have everything in your brain, right? If you can find the information, that's just as important for me." And so I told her, I said, go through it the first time and make note of the questions, and then read the chapter from there, and make note of the answers to those questions. And now, depending on which school it is, some schools, I think this one may be one, I have a pool of questions that it's pulled from, so you may not get the same questions every time. I don't remember. So if that's the case, you may not have all of the answers, but at least you've got a guide as you're going through and reading. So I recommended that to her. She's like, "Oh, okay, I'll do that." So that way you kind of focus what you're reading and maybe don't spend as much time reading. So that was my recommendation to her. Take it or leave it if it's helpful for you or not. But no, since you can use your notes and you can use the book while taking the quiz, and if we come to a consensus, oh goodness, I haven't had any coffee today, any caffeine. If we come to a consensus, we're like, I could really use a 3rd attempt, I'll go in and add it if you feel like that's going to be helpful. So yeah, just let me know. I'm flexible. I don't want them to take hours upon hours, but so yeah, let me know if that's. And looking at them across the board at all 3 schools where I teach, everyone's getting very good grades, and so A's and B's essentially. So I'm not too worried, but yeah, if we need to change something to make it a little more easier for you and your schedule, let me know. We'll do it. Sound good? Cool. All right, thank you all. Stay warm out there. Have a great weekend. And I will see you on Tuesday.